certified only, and they do level 2.1, which is intensive outpatient and and aftercare. So,
Are there different levels of addiction or need in terms of treatment?
Sometimes a person is assessed and maybe there's insufficient criteria for diagnosis. There's other times they meet criteria for a substance use disorder. Other times they meet criteria for a moderate or severe substance use disorder. We have 11 criteria that we go by that helps us to determine if it's mild, moderate, or severe.
Let's talk about the process of doing an assessment. What does that entail?
One part of it is as an interview with the individual, and so we're asking them questions about what brought you here today. We ask about legal history, any prior chemical dependency treatment history. We're also looking at family dynamics. We're looking at their education, medical, mental health. Those would be some of the things that we look at.
Do you look at sources outside of the self-report?
Yes.
What else do you look at?
We also try to collect collateral information, and again, that's a case by case. If it's a legal eval, then we would ask for the police report, the defendant case history, the breathalyzer result, if those are available. And as identified, sometimes we ask for medical or mental health.
And you said sometimes you talk to collateral sources. Can you just explain what that term means?
Okay. So collateral sources can be medical professionals or mental health professionals. Sometimes it could be work, sometimes it's family. Those would be some of them.
So
the collateral.
other people that you talk to besides the client?
Yes.
What about information regarding mental health?
As part of the assessment, we do multidimensional assessment, so we look at various dimensions of an individual. It's not limited to just the chemical dependency. So there's dimensions 1 through 6, so in dimension 3, we are looking at cognitive, behavioral, emotional. And so that could be mental health, or it could just be stressors, etc.
Why do you look at all these different dimensions?
What we're trying to do is identify needs and refer individuals to the appropriate resources.
What could happen if you try to treat a chemical dependency issue or substance use issue without dealing with a problem like mental health or some other stressor that's in that person's life?
It possibly could interfere with their ability for the chemical dependency treatment.
To succeed?
To succeed, to collect to hear the information.
When you're doing an assessment, do you make your recommendations and your diagnoses right when you talk to the person, or is that delayed?
It's case by case. If the information reported at the time of the interview, if it is clear cut, and we have these 11 criteria that we go by, if it's clear cut, we can make that determination then. There's other times it may not be clear cut. They may have underreported their use history, and then so that's where we may pick up information through the collateral resources.
Do diagnoses sometimes change after you've spoken to collateral sources?
It can.
Have you heard of the term co-occurring disorder?
Co-occurring, it's a mental health diagnosis and a chemical dependency diagnosis.
How are co-occurring disorders usually dealt with?
The agency I worked at was certified as chemical dependency only, so we would treat the person for their chemical dependency issues, and we would coordinate care with their mental health or mental health provider. So that might be a psychiatrist or a therapist.
So is the preference to deal with both the mental health and the chemical issue at the same time?
Preferably.
So when you're talking to a client and doing an assessment, how do you document what the client's telling you?
When I'm doing a chemical dependency assessment, I have a legal pad and I am writing notes. Everything that they're saying, I'm writing it down. And then, like I said, I also check collateral sources, and then I take the information that was reported by the individual in the interview notes, and the collateral information, and all of that is compiled into the evaluation.
When you are talking to collateral sources, how do you document the information that you are receiving?
It's case by case. There's times where I might have little notes that I've written, and I try to type those notes in as soon as possible, or other times I'm typing it in right after we have spoken. But we try to type them in as soon as possible, if not by the end of that day.
So when you say as soon as possible, does that mean quicker than the end of the day?
Yes.
So when you do a collateral source, when you type it into the computer, is it ever any later than the end of that day?
That can happen, but our goal is to try to do it as soon as possible after the conversation and or before the end of the day.
And when you are taking notes and typing those notes into the computer, do you take special care to be accurate?
Whatever is said in the notes is what was said. I'm well aware of all electronic files, evals, those are legal documents. So.
And what about when you write an assessment? Are you taking care to make sure that what you're putting in the written assessment is accurately reflected as in your notes and collateral sources?
Absolutely.
In 2012, did you do an evaluation of Aaron Ibarra?
Yes.
And do you recognize Aaron Ibarra in person today?
Yes.
And were you working at Alpine Recovery Services at that time?
Yes.
Do you remember when Aaron Ibarra came in?
According to the eval, the date was August 30th, 2012.
Do you recall if in Mr. Ibarra's case there were any particular concerns that arose about mental health or a co-occurring disorder?
I'd have to refer to the notes, but he mentioned when we were looking at the Dimension 3, which is the emotional, cognitive, behavioral, he talked about hearing voices. He mentioned specifically from Eric Harris, and he mentioned specifically Columbine.
Do you remember him telling you what the voice was telling him?
I would have to look at the case notes.
Would it be helpful
Yes,
for you to
please.
refer
Yeah.
you? I'm going to hand you what's been marked for identification. This is Defense Exhibit 190. Do you recognize what 190 is? Do you know what this packet is?
This is the fax cover sheet. Are you talking about this right here?
The whole packet.
Oh, okay, sorry. Look, it's the chemical dependency assessment that I conducted. There are some releases of information to, one is like, for instance, his psychiatrist, one is to the Edmonds Municipal Court. There's some other stuff. This is an intake application that he filled out.
Does this appear to be the records from Alpine
Yes.
Recovery?
Yeah.
Does it include, in addition to the assessment that you wrote, your notes that you put in the computer when you talk to collateral sources?
Yes.
So, in terms of what Mr. Ibarra was reporting to you, you had indicated you would need to see your report to know for sure. Can I direct you to page 4624, the final paragraph of that page?
Okay. Okay, so Mr. Ybarra reported he has fantasies about Columbine, stating he feels he identifies with one of the Columbine killers, whom he identified as Eric Harris.
Did he tell you when he had heard voices last?
He stated his last fantasy was on August 28th, 2012.
And did he specifically reference voices voices when he was talking to you about that?
According to what I wrote, he stated his last fantasy was August 28th, reporting that the voices scared him.
So he said on August
Mhm.
28th, the voices
Mhm.
scared him?
And that he contacted a psychiatrist that day who prescribed him medication.
And then did he also tell you what Eric Harris's voice was telling him to do? Last sentence of the page.
Let's see, telling him to hurt people.
And did he specifically reference that that was the voice of Eric Harris?
He said when he heard the voice of Eric Harris.
Were you aware that Aaron Ibarra was in mental health counseling and saw a psychotherapist and a psychiatrist at the time that he was coming to you for an evaluation?
At the time of the assessment, I had, he talked about the psychiatrist, and I obtained a release of information to the psychiatrist. He also said that he had been working with a therapist since earlier that year. So yes, both of them.
Okay. And did you talk to his psychiatrist and to his therapist?
Let's see. On September 4th, 2012, I spoke with the psychiatrist.
Did you tell the psychiatrist that Aaron Ibarra was reporting to you that he was hearing voices?
I did, yes.
Did you, was this something that the psychiatrist was aware of, or was this new information to the psychiatrist?
The psychiatrist said she was aware.
Did you talk to his therapist, Samantha Good?
I talked to her later that day.
September 5th?
Yes, sorry, September 5th.
And did you tell Samantha Good that Mr. Ibarra was having auditory hallucinations?
Just a second. I informed her of patient statements about auditory hallucinations.
And then did you also tell her that that was as recent as August 28th, 2012?
In the latter paragraph, yes, that patient reported auditory hallucinations as recently as August 28, 2012.
And you documented that you had this discussion and you told her these things?
Right.
And the same with the psychiatrist. You documented that you had that discussion and told her about the auditory hallucinations?
The psychiatrist I told her about, yes, about the auditory hallucinations. And
You told the psychiatrist about the auditory hallucinations?
yes, I did.
And you documented that?
Yes, on a document, yes.
What concerns does it raise for you when you have a client that's experiencing auditory hallucinations and is telling you he hears voices that scare him and that are telling him to kill people?
It is concerning, and I would go into asking a person, what are they hearing? Do they have any plans?
Did you do that with Mr. Ibarra?
Mm-hmm.
Do you often have clients come in with auditory hallucinations?
It does happen where, yes, individuals have had.
What about telling them to kill people? Is that common?
That's the first time, I've done over 500 evals, and that's the first time I can recall somebody specifically mentioning Eric Harris, specifically mentioning Columbine.
What was your treatment recommendations for Mr. Ibarra?
I recommended him to Fairfax, as they have staff that are trained in mental health.
Wait, I just want to stop before you go on. What is Fairfax?
Fairfax Hospital.
What do they do at
it-
Fairfax?
They have a co-occurring disorders program where they can address the mental health and the chemical dependency.
So it sounds like Fairfax does both alcohol, drug issues as well as mental health?
If I could clarify something, at Alpine, we could have worked with the individual with their mental health providers. However, I was concerned with his statements, not knowing what he was capable of, and I felt he would be best served going to Fairfax. They have mental health trained staff. They have a psychiatrist who would have also assessed him.
So this was an elevated level of
Yes,
concern you
it's,
had?
yes, it's a higher level of care,
Does Fairfax do inpatient or outpatient?
inpatient.
What's the difference between inpatient and outpatient?
It's more intensive. In outpatient treatment, they have their home life, their work life, et cetera, and they come into an outpatient treatment program for the educational piece. Whereas an inpatient, they would be in there for a period of days, possibly 21 days, 30 days.
So it's a live-in program?
It's a higher level of care.
Did you try to get Aaron admitted to Fairfax?
I did.
Did you talk to some of the staff at Fairfax Hospital
Bear with me a
on
second.
the 5th of September?
Okay, just a second. So I spoke with an intake person at Fairfax with Mr. Ybarra present to assist in the pre-screening. I informed them that he was assessed as alcohol dependence, which is what it was called at that time. This was 2012. And the treatment recommendations was for their facility.
When did you document the name of the person that you talked to at Fairfax?
Melanie.
Melanie? Did you tell Melanie at Fairfax that Mr. Ibarra was telling you he was having auditory hallucinations?
Hold on a second. Yes, that there were auditory hallucinations as recently as 8/28/2012, and he had contacted his psychiatrist.
So what time was it when you first talked to Melanie? Or that you
His
documented?
timestamp is 3:38.
Did you talk to Melanie again that same day?
I did.
And how much later?
So it looks like it was just a few minutes later.
And in that phone call, were you more specific about what was giving you rise to concern?
So according to the second note, I spoke to Melanie. And I told her that Mr. Ibarra reported auditory hallucinations, that he hears voices of Eric Harris telling him some kind of Columbine style.
Were you able to get him into Fairfax?
I was not.
No further questions.
Okay.
The
Dr.
statement
Dean?
has done.
Thank you. He said he was gonna take a bus and go try to get checked into Fairfax, is that right?
Correct.
But he never did,
Um,
to your knowledge.
Correct, to my knowledge, because when I met with him, I told him the outcome of the assessment. He agreed with the diagnosis, and I told him that Fairfax requested that he get a blood draw and be medically cleared. And he was going to take the bus to Swedish to do the blood draw.
But he never showed up as far as you.
As far as I know, he didn't.
Okay. So Ms. Carter, we spoke before, is that right?
Yeah. Yes.
You met with the defendant, I guess, 2 times
Yeah.
in person, is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
One time was on August 30th, 2012, when
Yes.
you talked with him, did your assessment,
Yes.
and then he came back on September 5th, and you told him about your recommendations. And
Yes.
That's when you told him to go to Fairfax, is that right?
Yes.
And during the assessment on August 30th, he told you all about the reason he was there, is that right?
Mhm.
And this was one of the court ordered for a DUI
Correct.
assessment.
Correct.
So, one of the things you talked to him about was the circumstances of that DUI, is that right?
On the assessment, yes.
And it was pretty basic. He described drinking in a variety of different bars and locations with his friends?
Yes.
Okay. So nothing about his description of that event was particularly unusual or concerning to you?
No.
And I think Okay, so, and then part of the assessment, you talked about all the different things you ask him about, living, job,
Mhm.
school, mental health, medical diagnosis, is that right?
Mhm.
Is that a yes?
Oh, yes,
Sorry, we're just making sure
Sorry.
it gets taken down. And so one of the things you asked him about was his school, work, and living situation, is that right?
yes,
Okay, and he told you that he received his diploma from Edmond Heights Homeschool Resource Center, is that right?
yes,
That he lived with his parents,
yes,
that he had a job for 8 years and then he quit, there were no issues with the job,
Correct.
is that right? And then you're asking about the level 3 stuff, the mental health diagnosis,
Correct.
is that right? And he told you, in fact, that he'd been diagnosed that year with psychosis
yes,
and obsessive compulsive disorder.
yes,
And he told you the names of his treatment providers?
Yeah,
The
yes.
psychiatrist and the therapist? And he also told you that part of what was going on is he's having fantasies about Columbine, is that right?
yes,
And that he identifies with one of the shooters, Eric Harris?
correct.
So he had no problem explaining all that to you?
I documented what he said.
Okay. He had no problem communicating?
Correct,
that
correct.
to you? Okay.
Correct.
And he, I think you had said, conveyed that the voices of Eric Harris scared him, made him afraid.
Correct,
So he wasn't okay with that, is that
correct.
right? That was something.
That's
that
what I would believe that. He said that he said that it scared him, and he said that he called his psychiatrist that day who prescribed him medication, and he said the medication was helping.
So nothing he said to you make him think that that was an okay thing to say or think?
No.
And that's about the only thing he said about the voices in his head, is that right?
No. Yeah, yes,
He never said anything about God or Lucifer or Satan?
no,
Never said anything about something entering his spine or anything like that?
no.
He said he identified with the shooter at Columbine?
Yes, whatever he said is in here. And it said that he feels he identifies with one of the,
And actually, I think before, when we talked before, you looked at that packet, there's a questionnaire that he filled out.
Yes.
Is that right? And in that questionnaire, he's actually asked about his mental health, any diagnosis, and any medications, is that right?
correct.
And he said he was taking Prozac and Risperidone.
Mhm.
And in that,
Correct. Sorry.
that questionnaire actually asks, do you have any hallucinations that are not the direct result of alcohol or drug use? Is that right? Well, actually, the question asks, do you have had a significant period
Correct.
where you've experienced any of the following not related to drug or
Correct,
alcohol
correct.
use? Is that right? And he didn't check hallucinations
No,
or phobias or paranoias
No.
or delusions or hostility or violence.
no,
He just checked serious depression.
yes,
And actually, he talked a lot about depression in relation to his drinking during the
Yes.
assessment. You're not a mental health professional, is that right?
correct.
You're not trained to make a mental health diagnosis?
No,
Chemical dependency?
chemical dependency.
But you made sure to convey what he told you to his mental health treatment provider?
Correct, as part of coordination of care.
And given your awareness with the different things he had said about alcohol use and then about these statements he made to you, you made sure to refer him to a dual diagnosis facility, is that right?
Correct.
That was Fairfax?
Correct,
And I think ultimately your recommendation was for residential inpatient treatment, is that right?
Fairfax.
And one of the concerns that you had, or one of the reasons you referred him to that, was his unwillingness to follow treatment recommendations in the past.
No, I referred him to the higher level of care because I was concerned with him saying Eric Harris and Columbine. And I was not sure what he was capable of. And I felt that he needed the higher level of care, Fairfax, because they have trained mental health staff.
And I get definitely the higher care
Right.
because of those statements, but part of looking at your report, and I'm looking
Okay.
at page 6 of 7 of your report,
Okay,
you indicated that
Okay.
the recommendation is for a level 3.7 residential treatment facility.
okay,
And you went on to describe sort of, and that was about the readiness to change. Is that
Correct,
right?
correct.
Okay, so this is kind of a different topic, but one of your concerns is his unwillingness to follow treatment recommendations. I think you noted that he said, "I drink by choice, I don't need treatment," is that right?
Correct,
And you documented some efforts that had been made previously for him to get treatment.
Correct.
Okay. And for instance, he told you he would directly report to Fairfax, take the bus and go right there.
correct.
And he did. It's, speaking of that level 3, or I'm sorry, criteria 3, the emotional behavioral and cognitive conditions. That's the dimension that, where you talk a lot about the mental health, is that right?
Yes,
You didn't note any cognitive concerns about his ability to follow treatment?
just the thinking, the thoughts that he was having at the time
Just
was
the thinking
concerning.
about
Mhm.
identifying with
Mhm.
character.
Yeah.
And a few days after you authored this report, my understanding is that he came in to pick up a copy, is that right?
Yes,
And he called you a few days later because he had reviewed the report and indicated that there were a couple things that were
correct.
incorrect.
Yes,
And one of those things is he had noted that in the report it documented that he had 6 shots and 4 beers in 1 hour. And he wanted to make sure that was changed because it wasn't 1 hour, it was all day, is that right?
he said he drank throughout the day and not in 1 hour.
And that is something that you had gotten wrong in your report.
Well, I have in parentheses in my notes that I could not find his statement in the eval.
The statement he was referring
Mhm.
to? Well, why don't you take a look at your report, I believe it's on page 2. So let me clarify. This is your notes. Defense counsel is asking you about, you accurately document every conversation and everything that you do in your assessments, is that right? So what we were just referring to was a note you created about this conversation with the defendant, is that right? But then you also have your report. So looking at page 2 of the report, the first paragraph, it states Mr. Ibarra reported that on June 5th, 2012, between 10 p.m. and 11 p.m., he consumed 4 16-ounce beers plus 6 shots of whiskey as a getaway, is that right?
Yes,
So that does say 1 hour.
yeah.
So he was right.
Okay,
Okay, so when he corrected, he said, he wanted to make sure, he
Okay.
didn't think he drank that much in 1 hour.
okay,
So he corrected your report there.
okay.
And speaking of the drinking, he had actually admitted to you that he had drank in between your first assessment and when he came back, right?
Correct.
And I think he said it's because it was karaoke night, he wanted to hang out with his friends.
Because I do, just a second. Patient acknowledged he drank 9/4 and 9/12. Excuse me. Okay, 9/4 and 9/1. It was karaoke night and he wanted to have fun.
Okay. So the other thing that he wanted to correct in your, the report that he said was about those threats, is that right?
Correct.
He said he denied making any threats,
Okay.
and he didn't want you to include that, is that right?
Let's see. He denied, let's see, he denied making threats. He was concerned about what the court would think, stating those things were in the past. And I recommended that he speak with his public defender.
So those are his statements.
So I don't
Denied
have
making
it that he,
threats?
I don't have it that he asked it to not be in there.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Okay.
The things he said to you was he denied making the threats,
Correct,
he was concerned about what the court would think,
correct,
and he said that those things were in the past.
correct.
Just one moment, Ms. Gardner. That's all the questions I
Okay.
have. Thank you.
Any more questions, Ms. Prentice?
Ms. Garner, in this discussion about threats, that you had with Mr. Ibarra on the 24th. You documented that although he was denying making the threat, was there reference in the medical paperwork about specific threats made on August?
Hold on just a second.
Page 4670.
Okay. Because in my notes I have that, however, in the medical paperwork, it stated specific type of threats that he stated in August of 2012.
No further questions. Nothing further. Thank you.
Okay.
You're all done. Can I have that, please?
Okay,
Thank you
thank
very
you.
much. Let's have a brief side vote. We'll do the same one, we'll just be a different time. You want to stand and stretch for 1 minute? Today we're going to take our normal lunch. We'll be back here at 20 minutes after 1 when we break at noon. And we'll go till completed with witnesses today. And then, as I said, tomorrow we have a normal day as well.
Your Honor, the defense calls Aaron Ibarra.
Mr. Ibarra, if you raise your right hand, you swear or affirm to tell the truth?
Yes, sir.
Please be seated here.
Mr. Ibarra, are you currently being held in the King County Jail?
Yes.
What are you being held for?
Or shooting Paul Lee and Sarah Williams?
Do you remember shooting Paul Lee and Sarah Williams?
Yes.
Do you know that that's a real thing that happened?
Yes, I do now.
Have you always known that it was a real thing?
Not at the time of the of that day.
When did you learn or realize that it was a real thing?
When I was in back of the police car and I asked the cops if the situation was real or if I was dreaming, and they told me this was a real thing and I did shoot real people.
Have Have you had trouble telling what is real and what's not real in the past?
I had trouble understanding when I had dreams in my sleep doing shootings, but I realized that they were just but they were just dreams. I thought they were real at first.
Have you had thoughts of a shooting when you were awake in the past?
Yes.
And have you had thoughts of any particular shooting?
The Columbine and Virginia Tech.
Have you had thoughts about you doing a shooting?
Yes.
What started you thinking about a shooting?
I was hearing Eric Harris's voice, but before that, I felt God talking to me saying something to me in my heart.
What was God telling you in your heart?
That I've been sinning and I'm cut off from heaven and I'm set to go to hell, so he's gonna have Satan control the destructive parts. I have to do destruction in order to go to hell.
Why do you have to go to hell? Why did God want you to go to hell?
It was I was an example of a price of sin for others in the community, also in the world.
When did you start hearing Eric Harris's voice?
Little bit after I started drinking.
What was Eric Harris saying?
That I have to go to do a massacre or mass shooting somewhere in the public, but most likely a college campus.
You said that you started hearing his voice a little bit after you started drinking. Did you hear his voices when you were drunk or when you were sober, or both?
I was sober, but it was in the time period when I was drinking.
Did you hear Eric Harris's voice only one time?
No, many times.
How often?
Every day, every time throughout the day.
Must have been scary. How did it make you feel?
It was intense, scary, and confusing in an intensive way.
What did you do about it?
I drank more because I thought getting drunk would shut the voices up, and that worked.
Did you talk to anyone about it?
I talked to my brother about it, and he was concerned.
What was you concerned about?
Me researching public destruction on the internet about school shootings and other public destruction.
Why were you researching school shootings and public destruction on the internet?
I was obsessing, and that's also what the voice was telling me to do, to get an idea of what I had to do because of what God wanted me to do.
What was God wanting you to do?
Is to be a sacrifice to show others out in the world about sin and what goes on out in and what damages goes on out in the world.
Why did you choose your brother to talk to over someone else?
He was one of the only ones that I can go to if I need to say something to somebody.
Why not your dad?
He was, at that time, he was incarcerated in Chelan County Jail. That's Snohomish County.
Why not your mom?
She was going through difficulties with situations that was going on with my dad and my brother, and things being stolen from our house.
When you told your brother, what did you tell him?
I told him that I was hearing the voice of Eric Harris demanding me and commanding me to do a massacre.
At some point, did you do something about your drinking?
I did go to detox about a few weeks later after I talked to my brother, and
Was that something your brother wanted you to do?
yeah, he told me I should stop drinking and go see a therapist and a psychiatrist.
When you were drinking, how much were you drinking at that point in time before you went to detox? How much were you drinking?
I was drinking large, various amounts, hard liquor and beer with high volume, and I would black out most of the time.
Why were you drinking so much?
Everything got so intense, and I felt pushed by the feelings, and I was getting paranoid. I needed one reason was to calm my nerves from being paranoid, and also to shut everything down that was planned, or God's plan.
Did drinking shut down the plan?
Yes, getting drunk, feeling really drunk to not do anything shut down the plan.
What about Eric Harris's voice? Did drinking shut down Eric Harris's voice?
Yes, it did.
Did drinking so much cause other problems?
Yes.
What other problems?
I was throwing up quite a bit, and I was saying random disturbing things to people I know, which got them concerned.
When you were saying these random disturbing things to people that you know, were you able to stop it when you saw they were disturbed?
It was hard because I kept thinking about it, but I kept blacking out. I didn't even, whenever time I'd black out or get really drunk, it would be, I was able to stop it then.
If you weren't drunk, were you able to stop talking about it or thinking about it?
No, because everything was getting so intense, I was getting paranoid about it.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Bartlett, I'm going to have you step down. We'll complete it after lunch. So I'm going to rejoin Ms. Brandis if you would. Thanks to jury, we're going to take our recess, and so you'll be back here by 20 minutes after 1. We will continue with Mr. Ibarra's testimony. Please leave your notebooks in the chairs.